fuel bowl all cleaned up. Soaked it in simple green and hot water for a couple of hours. Real high concentration of simple green. Still had to use a little bit of lacquer thinner to get some of the old O-ring residue off the return line right there. I had to use a little bit of a brass wire brush in there to get the old sealant out, and this one also had a little bit of O-ring residue, had to come out there too. But yeah, a lot of scrubbing. It's good. Fuel bowl rebuild complete. All new O-rings in the sensor, drain valve, plugs. I pulled the fittings, the outlet fittings, and the inlet fitting. Cleaned them real good, got them shiny. I used the Gasola. I installed the diesel O-rings, billet cap, and I also bought the Ford kit, which replaces all this stuff, the poppet, this bushing. You can see my original spring was just hammered. I used the gold spring. I left out some of the stuff in that guy, the check valve. Left out that stuff. That's just to keep it from spouting fuel if you leave the cap off. Getting that connector on right there was a little challenging, but the forceps were good. Use these. iPad was handy. Used all the diesel O-rings, websites, put all in my Apple Notes and just brought them up. So yeah, it was a little stressful just cleaning it, not wanting to make mistakes, torquing these. A couple notes. The heater comes with 2 new screws. So just know that you can get rid of 2 of your old screws. And then also this guy comes with 2 new longer screws, so make sure you use those. They warn you about the check ball that's in here. Mine dropped on the floor, I missed it, but luckily I found it, so don't forget about the check ball. Yeah, so it's all together. I'm gonna put the filter and the cap on now and stick it on the shelf while I finish. Share some pictures and thoughts on the fuel bowl before I cleaned it. Here's just a picture of the inlet and the outlet. Didn't look too bad. I cleaned it up pretty good. Here's all the original stuff on the fuel bowl. I took it apart. There's the sensor. Here's the drain valve. Here's the check valve. This just keeps the truck from starting or fuel from spouting out if you leave the lid off. So take this out, you get a little bit better fuel flow, I guess. I left this body on the truck because this guides the fuel filter down into the body. When I put the fuel filter in by hand, I was having trouble. I couldn't get it to go down. The issue I was having was that the O-ring on the fuel filter itself would come off the lip and get scrunched against the side of the fuel bowl. So I was able to get it to go in square by using the lid to push down the fuel filter. and then the fuel filter guiding on this helped a lot. I did use a little bit of silicone grease on this to help it. Seemed to work pretty good. Here's the original fuel filter or fuel heater element. I bought a new one of those. Here's the return cap with my original spring. Look how hammered my spring is. The poppet and the bushing that are all part of this assembly. So this was kind of an expensive rebuild on this fuel bowl. This guy right here I bought a diesel O-rings one that was like $67. This was another $60 for this rebuild kit for these two items and this O-ring or bushing, whatever they call it. $50 for this heater, and then the extended HPOP and fuel bowl rebuild kit was like $100 and something bucks. So a lot of O-rings, but I used almost everything. So this O-ring right here, when you go to put this in, I guess when it's in the truck you just set it there and you screw it down with the cap, but I was just trying to shove this in and this O-ring would pop off the edge and get scrunched against the side. There it is after an initial scrub. Is one side with everything removed except the plugs. Plugs are still in and the fittings are still in there. The other side, you can see the original O-rings. They leave this residue. Another shot of the outputs. That's one to each cylinder head. It's kind of a picture before I pulled them out. Just wanted to know how far to go in. When I torqued these in, I did it by hand. I put gasoil on there and I torqued them by hand. Here's a comparison of the FPR, fuel pressure regulator caps. Obviously the original one on the right and the new one on the left. Yeah, this is a big upgrade because this thing tends to break, apparently. This is just cast aluminum. This thing is billet. It felt much better. Notice how it's thicker. So you have to use the screws that came with this. They're a little longer. And this is key right here. Notice this chamfer on this O-ring, or I don't know if they call it an O-ring or a gasket. So that goes in here. You can see it right here. And I was able to zoom in on this thing with my phone because I was having a hard time understanding which way it went in. So I sent this picture to Bob at Diesel O-Rings. He actually got back to me. So this is the correct orientation. So this goes down. You can kind of see this chamfer matches this chamfer on the poppet. It's kind of another view of it. And that's how it looks once it's assembled. Here's the 3 springs that came with the kit. I used this center gold one. There's a silver and a black. This gold one's the middle pressure. I think that's 65 psi. You can tell my original spring got some issues. It's actually starting to show some corrosion. That's 238,000 miles. So if that would have cracked right there, I wonder what would have happened. There's another view. Looks to be a little shorter. And crooked. Here's the fittings after I cleaned them up. I ended up having to use a scribe to get some of the, I guess, the original gasoil off of those. Here's some of the international part numbers I got from either Diesel O-Rings or Riffraff. This is the stuff I left out or replaced. Here's some of the items purchased from Diesel O-Rings. Some of these were diesel O-ring items, but bought through Riffraff. So here's the full fuel and oil repair combo kit. A lot of stuff included with this. It includes a serviceable plug for the HPOP. I should have bought the mounting gasket for the HPOP. I had to go to O'Reilly's to get that. Same price here. Should have just bought it from Diesel O-Rings. The quick release hose tool, buy that. It's worth the 16 bucks. Getting the high pressure oil lines off of the pump and the cylinder head fittings. This is golden, really easy to use. Extended O-ring HPOP kit, another 23 bucks. Here's all the stuff that's included in the regular kit. I used all of this except for these 3 items with the red arrows. Mainly, I didn't need these O-rings because I bought new fittings, came with those. And then I got rid of my exhaust back pressure valve, so I didn't need this. Relief valve piston bushing O-ring. I didn't use this just because another one came with the FPR kit, so I actually have an extra. This is an extra. These 3 guys in blue are the sleeves that are for the fuel lines. The outlets to the heads, the input from the fuel tank, and the return through the FPR. Here's the extended HPOP, IPR to the HPOP, IPR internal seal O-ring. I did replace the IPR and the ICP sensor last year, but when I had the IPR out this time, I did just go ahead, since I had new O-rings, even though they're only a year old, I just replaced them. O-ring for the top of the reservoir. 2 O-rings for the hose connectors, didn't use those. HPOP fitting threads, didn't use those because the fittings came with those. 2 interior hose, didn't use those. Didn't use those. O-ring for the black bypass nut, top front of the pump. I did use that. This is the low pressure plug. You have to keep the pump in a certain orientation because that has some spacers, springs and stuff. Real easy to do, but you don't want to drop any of that stuff or lose it. O-ring for the pressure port plug. Yeah, I use that. 680, I use that. O-ring for the 18 millimeter plug on the rear of the pump. I use that. Some notes down here. I use the best O-rings. I guess they call it this blue. That's an option actually. Here's the fuel pressure relief rebuild kit. Oh, they call that a poppet seat. They don't call it an O-ring. They don't call it a gasket. And that fits into this poppet a certain way. So I used all this stuff. Here's the FPR housing from Diesel O-rings. This thing is awesome. And this is the description for the FPR. It's kind of interesting down here to read about Diesel O-rings warning you about buying stuff off of eBay, and you know, who knows what you get off of eBay. So it felt good getting this stuff from Bob at Diesel O-rings, and like I said, he's fantastic. He answered some of my questions on a weekend. Fuel bowl is in. Reservoir, HPOP reservoir is in. All nice and tight. Only note here, this back pressure sensor, you need to have that out for these bolts to be able to clear right here. Those hold the fuel bowl on. These are 18 foot-pounds, same as these. These ones made me nervous. It's an aluminum, but it was fine. No real issues. I torqued these all the way down until there was no gap. That's what diesel O-ring says to do. Same here. One more note while I was thinking about it. These bolts, the threads they go into in this fuel bowl, I cleaned them up. I cleaned those threads up with a tap. Held it vertically and just worked the tap up in there, back and forth. And then I checked those bolts real good to see if they went all the way in. A lot of stuff came out, a lot of junk, cleaned up nice.